What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? It's week 16, Cashing Points. I'm here with Graham Barfield, Ryan Heath, as always. We're going to go game by game, talk through this 11-game slate. A lot to get to, so let's get right into it. Buffalo Bills at the Cleveland Browns. Bills are 10.5-point favorites. Total here is 41.5. On the injury front, David Njoku, Dylan Sampson, and Jerome Ford are all out this week for Cleveland. Spread here doesn't really indicate a Josh Allen Superman game, Ryan. 10.5 points. Browns offense has been pretty brutal outside of that game with Tennessee. That said, Ryan, everything does sort of line up for James Cook this week, who I'm viewing as a pretty strong tournament play overall. I think the top end of running back is really, really strong this week. But James Cook, certainly one of the guys who stands out in this game. What do you think about Cook here?
Yeah, I do think that this Bills team is as simple as I want a ton of James Cook this week. We're showing like around 15% projected ownership right now. I would love to have double the field on that. It's really just the perfect game script for him. Bills are 10.5-point favorites. Cook is at 26.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game across 6 games that the Bills have won by multiple scores this year. His workload has been scaling up over the past 3 weeks. He's up at the RB4 by expected fantasy points per game. And keep in mind, James Cook has not really been a high volume player for much of the past 2 seasons. He's just always been insanely efficient, but now he's getting a top 5 workload. The Bills kind of told us back in September that they were going to save him for December. It's December now. They've unleashed him. So yeah, I think he's an amazing play. It's a great matchup now. This Browns run defense has kind of given up, which is something that we've been on for the last couple weeks. But yeah, they're the 3rd biggest run funnel by P-roll allowed since week 10. Top 5 schedule adjusted matchup over that time frame. So yeah, Cook at 7,700, one of my favorite plays on the slate.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Really like me some James Cook here. Ryan, any Buffalo pass catchers stand out to you in this one? It's tough. None of these guys project particularly well. It's been very, very spread out. I think, maybe you could punt it with a Dawson Knox. Kincaid's our best value right now among the pass catchers at 4,300, but even he doesn't really pop in projections. I'm not sure I'm really getting to anybody on the Buffalo side outside of James Cook in this contest.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. The tight ends are closest to being interesting, but yeah, there's just nothing to really bother with here for me.
Yeah, Graham, Brown side, Harold Fannin really, really popping in projections. 14 targets, over 20 expected fantasy points last week. Obviously, Njoku out again this week. I think you could also argue for Quinshon Judkins. We've seen guys like Sean Tucker go absolutely crazy. Travion Henderson last week against this Bills run defense. Curious what you're seeing on the Brown side here.
Yeah, Fannin's an amazing value. Once again, the volume's just been incredible with Shedeur, 19% or more of the targets in each game. He's been over 24%, I believe, in 3 of those 4. This has been typically a really bad matchup for tight ends. Bills have erased, them pretty much all season, man. But, Fannin's not a tight end. He's a receiver. He's going to run 60% of his routes, out wider in the slot. So he's an awesome play. Once again, I think we're going to see a lot of 2 tight end builds on DraftKings. Fannin certainly being a big part of that value equation at 4,500. I'll be honest, the more I've thought about it today, I think Quinshon Judkins is just a trap. It's an amazing on-paper matchup, but this guy's had a couple of amazing on-paper matchups and just done nothing with it. By yards before contact per carry, they're actually worse than Las Vegas. And, he's missing his entire right side of his line again. Yeah, I know the volume was good last week, Jake, but, it's still I don't think it's enough to kind of overcome this team environment and just massive spread to the Browns could get erased again.
Yeah, Ryan, Judkins was a guy that we talked about on the DFS early look earlier this week that comes out on Mondays. And, I think earlier in the week I was a bit more excited about Judkins. The more I've thought about it, the more I think you've convinced me that he isn't a great play. Do you want to just touch on some of your Judkins notes before we move on?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to what Graham said. It's every running back that's crushed against the Bills this year has done so via hyper efficiency, and that just hasn't been what Judkins has been able to do all year. He hasn't gone over 4 yards per carry in a game since week 5. Only 2 runs of 15 or more yards since week 8. And yeah, just every name that has done well against the Bills has done it with like 8 or 9 yards per carry. It's like your Achans, your Travion Hendersons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't see it.
Fair enough. All right, Los Angeles Chargers at the Dallas Cowboys. Chargers are 1.5-point dogs. Total is 49.5. Quentin Johnston questionable with a groin injury. He logged limited practices all week. Let's start with the Chargers side here, Graham. I'm struggling a little bit with Justin Herbert stacks. Over the last 3-4 weeks, no Chargers receiver has averaged more than 33 receiving yards per game. The Chargers offense overall has gone more run heavy. Justin Herbert hasn't hit 15 DraftKings fantasy points since October. All that said, I mean, this is the perfect matchup, the single best matchup for both wide receivers and quarterbacks on the season. Graham, I'm curious what you're seeing with the Chargers offense here.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. This game total has come up too, and it feels like the sentiment on this game is lower just because maybe Dallas is dead, and I understand that aspect, but like it's still like a best possible matchup. This is the same defense that just made J.J. McCarthy look good. I know Herbert is hurt. I know his entire offensive line has died, but I think it's a mistake not to like really consider at least one Chargers receiver this week, and the guy I like the most is Rondé Gadsden. He's 4,100. It's just like a best possible matchup for him. Dallas plays almost all zone. Gadsden has crushed zone this season. He's tight end 2 by yards per route run. Also has a ton of upside. He's over the last 8 weeks, he's only second to Darren Waller in terms of average depth of target among tight ends. I think he's a really strong play. It's just like I'm not super stoked on Herbert. And again, it kind of feels like a mistake, right? Like just because this matchup is so good, but you really question the ceiling. I think at this point with this offense, I mean, he's basically been under 14 or under 15 DK in 5 straight starts. All that said, though, like I do feel like one of these Chargers receivers is probably going to pop as a pretty good value. I'm placing my bet on Gadsden, but I think you can make a similar kind of upside case for Ladd McConkey because he's had a few spiked weeks this season. I do think it's a mistake the field's making this week where we're like searching for upside at receiver and not really, considering these Chargers receivers too heavily. I'm going to be definitely trying to mix these guys in a little more than the field.
Yeah, I certainly am too. I think, something that I'm going to try to make a point of doing with these Chargers wide receivers is at least mini stacking them with a CeeDee Lamb, a George Pickens, because, if this game plays a little slower than the total implies, I think the Chargers are really just going to want to grind it out on the ground. Ryan, I'm curious what you're seeing Chargers side and in this game overall.
Yeah, I mean, largely agree with most of Graham's analysis in that it's hard to buy too much into the passing game, but yeah, I do think you're wise to try to pick a guy here. The guy I would pick would be Ladd McConkey for what it's worth. Earlier in the season, even when the Chargers were playing without both of their starting tackles, McConkey had weeks of 26 and 15.7 DraftKings points in kind of similar setups against just, bad secondaries, but a lot of pressure. Like they still managed to spam him some targets. He's coming off these back-to-back bottom 5 matchups to the slot against the Eagles and Chiefs. So Ladd is where I would kind of place my chips, but I'm with everybody in that, Herbert has faced the second highest pressure rate, third highest quick pressure rate since the bye. Like it's just kind of rough here.
It is. And I mean, we have so many great cheap quarterback options that I just don't think you can convince me to pay up the $6K for Herbert. But obviously we want exposure to a game environment with a 49 total. Keenan Allen just 4,800 as well. I know neither of you guys mentioned him, but I think between him, Gadsden, McConkey, we have a lot of good options to sort of mini stack this game with either a CeeDee Lamb or a George Pickens. Speaking of Pickens and this Dallas offense, Ryan, I noticed that you had Dak Prescott, George Pickens in your, or I think it was just Pickens in advanced matchups. So what are you seeing there on the schematic side for Dallas?
Yeah, just Pickens for me. Dak, I would get it, but just a lot of these quarterbacks that are more expensive this week, I would rather spend it elsewhere. And Pickens is one of those places. So the Chargers play a ton of cover 4. That's one of their highest rate shells. And Pickens leads the Cowboys in yards per out run against cover 4 this year. Gets targeted 13% more often. And we kind of have like a squeaky wheel narrative with Pickens. He's coming off back-to-back games where he hasn't been that involved in the offense. His routes haven't necessarily been executed with the highest effort. But he, like, the media has kind of been all over him. But he has like responded well to it. I would say we're seeing like a more mature version of George Pickens this year. And I mean, Brian Schottenheimer right after last game was saying that they're going to get him more involved. And if there is any weakness for this Chargers defense, it is that they just allow quarterbacks to stay on their first read very often. They've allowed the 4th highest first read target rate to opposing offenses this year. So if there is like an intention to get Pickens involved early and often to kind of quiet the doubters, then I think they're going to succeed. And it reminds me of a few weeks ago where CeeDee Lamb wasn't really producing. There was a lot of questions about, hey, why is Pickens the one with back-to-back 30-point games? And then Lamb has gone crazy the last few weeks. So I really do think it can be kind of a bit of push and pull with these guys. You can make a similar case for Lamb. I prefer Pickens just because he's a bit cheaper, has shown a bit more of a ceiling in spots this year. But yeah, it's a similar case to use either of them in a mini stack.
Yeah, really like that you mentioned the coach speak there because things did come true when Schottenheimer said, we're going to get 88 the ball. All of a sudden, CeeDee Lamb's targets started spiking and said the same thing this week regarding George Pickens. So sort of like that walk down narrative street. I think my favorite way to play this game is a Pickens and then maybe a Gadsden, Keenan Allen, McConkey mini stack here. But yeah, Lamb's also a solid play. It's just tough. Like I wish the quarterbacks in this game were both like $500 cheaper. Then all of a sudden we could talk about some more full game stacks, but I do think the minis are pretty strong overall. Don't think there's anybody else really worth talking about for this one.
Real quick, I think it's worth having a quick Javonte discussion. He's 6,400.
Good call.
I think it's interesting in the fact that like Dallas has the 4th best implied team total on the slate. He did get hurt last week, but prior to that, he'd been over 75% of the snaps, I believe, in 6 straight games. So bell cow upside in a game where, Dallas still is kind of projected to win. I know it feels weird with them being dead and the Chargers obviously, in the thick of the AFC, wild card hunt in the division as well. But yeah, I think Javonte is pretty interesting with the Charger. I'm with you on Pickens, but I think, 6,400 Javonte seems like a pretty good value, no?
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you there. Projects pretty well in our stuff, and this is kind of a tough week for cheaper running backs. So, looking across the board, I think like kind of the best you're going to do for a lot of these cheaper running back builds are like these lower 6K guys. Javonte only 6,400. For a guy who's projecting at least in our numbers right now for a little over 17 DraftKings points, pretty strong value. Thanks for catching me there. Anything to add on Javonte, Ryan?
Yeah, really just that if you are afraid of this Chargers offense and don't think it's going to go well, that's like the easiest way to get leverage. You can go Javonte plus Cowboys defense. He's been positively correlated with them in wins this year. So yeah, I think that's also a valid angle for this game.
Yeah, I really like that. All right, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. Total here is 45.5. Buccaneers are favored by 3. Huge divisional game. Fairly clean, though, from an injury perspective. Graham, let's start with the Bucs side here. It's sort of another tough one where we have Baker Mayfield, who's not projecting particularly well, but I do want pieces, obviously, from this Bucs passing attack. I think I'm more interested in full game stacks probably from the Carolina side. But yeah, I'm curious what you're seeing between Mike Evans and Igbuka. The prices for both players are pretty strong. We've got Mike Evans at 6,300. He led the team last week with a 29% target share. And then Emeka Igbuka, 5,900, 18.1 expected fantasy points over the last 3 games. So I think those are the 2 easiest guys to argue for. I'm curious if you're seeing anything else on the Bucs side, what you think of those guys.
I think Mike Evans is my favorite play on this slate just in general, 6,300. The dude is like unbelievably good, still so good last week. The volume's been amazing. You look at his 4 games played, the 4 full games he played, basically the minus, take out the game against Detroit where he got hurt, 25, 29, 28, and 29% of the targets. I mean, it's just like absurd volume. This is a guy who's shredded J.C. Horn too in the past, so I'm not concerned about the individual matchup. It's also a good schematic matchup. The dude leads all receivers in average separation score this year. I mean, she's just like an awesome play. I haven't been interested in Baker at all this year. And that's kind of rare for me. I've always been a Baker fan. I just think he's been a little overpriced. We've been talking about it, Jake, like quarterback pricing has been kind of screwy on DraftKings this year. I think this is the first week where Baker's priced somewhat correctly at 5,700. It's the cheapest he's been all season. He's averaging 20.1 fantasy points per game in starts with Mike Evans. And if he maintained that pace, he'd be basically the QB6. Last week, Tampa just called their most pass-heavy game plan of the year. They were at like a plus 15% PRO. And typically that's like not how you play the Panthers, but I do think there's some signal like with Evans and Godwin and Igbuka all being healthy. Panthers can't pressure the quarterback either. I really like Baker with Evans this week. I think that's a way that like the field isn't really building with these quarterbacks because Baker still kind of is wedged in that weird pocket where we got Goff and Nix projecting pretty well. Dak's okay, and then we've got a ton of cheap quarterbacks we're going to talk about. I think Baker's a pretty fun contrarian angle on this slate.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, just looking at this game, neither Baker nor Bryce Young is projecting for much ownership. So if you do end up stacking this game up with either quarterback, you're going to save a lot on ownership. Ryan, curious what you think of the Bucs side, and then we can talk Carolina because I am pretty excited about my guy Bryce Young in this one.
Yeah, I would mostly just echo Graham. I agree. We have Mike Evans right now around 6 or 7% projected ownership. If that holds, he's the best play on the slate to me as well. I kind of don't get why the entire industry hasn't just realized, he's easily like a fantasy wide receiver 1 now. I won't repeat all of Graham's analysis, but season high 249 catchable air yards for Baker Mayfield last week. I do think that is also possibly a signal that he is healthier. That's kind of something he struggled with throughout the season with his play and his health. So yeah, you can certainly play it just Baker plus Evans, but I think I might prefer to play it from the Panthers side with Evans as the bring back. I feel like I'm never into Bryce Young, but yeah, I'm kind of tempted at 5,100 this week. Nobody's really going to play him. 4 of his last 16 games, he's gone over 25 DraftKings points. So basically, he's gone for 5x value in 25% of his most recent games. This is the single softest schedule-adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks. So, really, the only argument against Bryce Young is that he always goes off in spots we don't expect. If you this seems like a good spot, so maybe it would be the one he disappoints you. But I just don't care about that if he's going to be 3-4% rostered. Give me some Bryce Young. You can stack him with Teteroa McMillan. He's been playing banged up, and we've really been seeing Jalen Coker kind of outplay him over the past few weeks. He's down at just 4,400. He's a solid value in our stuff. It's a decent enough schematic matchup as well, where the Buccaneers kind of funnel everything underneath, which benefits Coker more than McMillan or Xavier Legette, certainly. I really like Coker. Team high first read target share and fantasy points per game with 17.7 over the past 2 weeks. I'm a cokehead, always been a cokehead. So the Bryce Young, Jalen Coker, Mike Evans bring back is my favorite way to play this. I think it's a really underrated game overall.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's a really cheap way to get exposure to this game. And I mean, 3% owned Bryce Young, and like you said, single softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks since week 11. Tampa Bay gave up 49.9 fantasy points to Josh Allen, 24.7 to Tyler Shuck, 30.7 to Kirk Cousins over that stretch. So this is a really, really good spot for Bryce Young, who also has, sneaky sort of rushing upside, even though he's very, very small. He can run the ball. And in a lot of those, games where he has turned in a solid fantasy performance, has managed a rushing touchdown or two. Certainly like that angle. Also just wanted to note on Coker versus Tet. We're, accounting for the fact that Tet is banged up in our projections, the fact that Coker has kind of outplayed him recently. Tet's still projecting as a better value. I like both guys. I think pretty easy to double stack Bryce. One of the great things about this game is all the prices on the pass catchers and the quarterbacks are pretty nice across the board. Ryan, last guy I'll ask you about here, Bucky Irving, projecting for, 8, 10, 12% ownership across the board. I have, legitimate workload concerns here. Sean Tucker stealing goal line stuff, Rashad White stealing routes. I think you can always make an argument for Bucky on hyper efficiency, but, is there anything I'm missing on a 6,700 Bucky Irving? I just don't really love him this week.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I think I'd rather pay down a bit to a Javonte Williams or pay up a bit to a James Cook and feel pretty solid that I'm getting all of the goal line work, right? Because, he just didn't have it last week. Unfortunately in the league, all these exciting running backs just aren't getting the high-value touches. You have to do what Ken Walker did last night if you want to post a ceiling game when you have one of these types of workloads that Bucky has currently. So, I don't have much interest either.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make an argument for Bucky, Panthers are giving up the fourth most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs since week 11, but, still those workload concerns are pretty legit. I think I'd rather attack through the pass catchers in this one. All right, keep it moving. Minnesota Vikings at the New York Giants. Total here is 43.5. Vikings are favored by 2.5 points. Also a fairly clean game from an injury perspective. Graham, I have legitimate interest in J.J. McCarthy this week. He's averaged 22.5 DraftKings fantasy points per game over his last 2 games. Also over that stretch, he's middle of the pack in catchable throw rate, which I feel like is really all we need to also argue for Justin Jefferson, who's at his cheapest price tag since week 6 of 2020, which was his rookie season. Graham, can I sell you on any 9+ Justin Jefferson stacks this week?
I'm into it. I think it makes sense. We've seen the ceiling, in 2 good games in 2 good matchups against Washington, and like you were kind of alluding to, this is another one. Beat up on Washington, beat up on Dallas. Giants giving up the 7th most passing fantasy points per game. They've been burnable all year. Jefferson makes a ton of sense. He's just like flopped in both of those matchups, though. It's super frustrating because McCarthy is objectively playing a little better, but he still has 6 catches on 18 targets over his last 3 games. It's been brutal. Obviously Jefferson has the highest ceiling. I think Hawkinson makes a little bit of sense too. I question the ceiling with him though. Yeah, but McCarthy makes a lot of sense on DraftKings, and if you play on FanDuel, he makes a lot of sense over there too. He is very, very cheap across the industry. I believe on FanDuel he's 6,500 actually over there. He's probably my favorite punt quarterback on FanDuel. It's either him or Tyler Shuck at 6,800. Bryce Young is also 6,600. You guys made great arguments for him. I think he certainly makes sense. But McCarthy, 6,500 in a game that really could shoot out. I think 43.5 game total is fine, but both of these offenses have produced some ceiling outcomes as of late. Obviously, Giants are trying to tank a little bit for the first pick, but both quarterbacks kind of trending up. Dart obviously looking fully healthy again. I like this game environment a little bit more than the markets do, it seems.
Yeah, really like the angle on JJ, Hawkinson, Jefferson. Both pretty appealing prices. I mean, $6K for a wide receiver that's as good as Justin Jefferson is pretty nice. I just get the sense that this is the lowest salary we're going to see him at in years. I mean, it has been in years, but I don't know if he'll ever be 6K again.
I know. I did a double take looking at that. I mean, it's unbelievable how far he's fallen.
Yeah, no, it has been crazy, but I do think this is the week that 9 can finally find him. Aaron Jones.
I was gonna mention real quick. He's out of play on FanDuel. He's 8,400, but $6K on DraftKings is an amazing price for him.
It really is. Aaron Jones is projecting for some ownership here. I don't really get it. I don't think I'm going to end up on much Aaron Jones at all. Only 60% of snaps, 10.2 expected fantasy points last week. If you're, heavily stacking up the Vikings here just based on the defensive matchup, I sort of get it in some JJ stuff. But Ryan, any love for Aaron Jones before we talk Giants? He seems pretty thin to me.
It makes enough sense. Like I think he's a pretty similar play to like what Chris Rodriguez or eventually Bill Krosky-Merritt were last week. But yeah, if there's going to be ownership on it, I'm just not that interested. If he was going to be 2-3%, it might be a different story.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. He is priced down at 5,200, and like I said, not a ton of running back value on this slate. So I understand it from that perspective, but just tough based on the usage. On the other side of this game, we have Jackson Dart. He's up at 5,800. People were talking about him running less, but he did turn in 9 carries, 3 design carries for 63 yards. Granted, he did take another trip to the Blue Medical Tent after one of those design carries. Still, though, finished as the QB4, QB3, QB13, QB7, QB2, and QB9 over his last 6 full games. Averaged 25 fantasy points per game over that span. Ryan, I'm curious if you have any interest in Dart. I know the matchup is tough, and I do always worry a little bit about rookies against a Brian Flores defense, so I'm curious if you're seeing anything schematically.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I definitely get the base case, like the upside is there. He can run in multiple touchdowns for sure. But yeah, Dart has been worse against the blitz this year, which the Vikings do the most of any defense. We see his fantasy points per dropback fall from 0.72 to 0.54 when he's blitzed. His deep throw rate goes down from 18% to 8%. So I do think it's legitimately a bit upside limiting. Also, against 2 high looks, we see both Theo Johnson and Darius Slayton's efficiency kind of come down a decent amount, like 47% deduction to their yards per out run. So that's a little bit rough too. I think you can play Dart, single him with Wan'Dale Robinson, who is nicely priced, especially on FanDuel. He's nicely priced. Yeah. On DraftKings, you aren't having to pay into double-digit ownership for Wan'Dale, which is nice for a change. So that's like fine enough. I think I prefer to play it from the Vikings side in this game, but I certainly get it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Good call on Wan'Dale. He is, I believe, a top 5 FanDuel value for us. Not popping nearly as hard over on DraftKings, where he's priced up at 6,200, but averaged 18.1 expected fantasy points per game over his last 3 games. And I think the craziest Wan'Dale Robinson stat of all, he has more deep targets this year than Jamison Williams and Rashid Shaheed. So there is some legit like tournament upside with Wan'Dale. In the past, it's like, oh, Wan'Dale, he's just the same side of the coin as Khalil Shakir. That's just not the case this year. He's getting legit deep stuff, especially if you're playing on FanDuel. Worth a look, and if you're stacking up Dart on DK, like Wan'Dale a little bit. Theo Johnson also projecting as an okay value, but would definitely prefer Wan'Dale in my Dart stacks. Keep it moving to the Cincinnati Bengals at the Miami Dolphins. Total here is 47.5. Bengals are favored by 4.5 points. Noah Fant is out. T. Higgins had a full practice on Friday. He's officially questionable. I feel like there's no world where the Bengals should be trotting out T. Higgins in this game, but they're just determined to be the worst franchise in the NFL and put a guy who's had 2 concussions in the last 3 weeks at risk. It would be crazy to me if T. Higgins played. Graham, let's talk Bengals with that injury stuff out of the way. You know, Joe Burrow has not been playing particularly well. He's priced up at 6,500. Again, one of these like more expensive quarterbacks that just don't project good enough to really crack a lot of optimals, really pop in sims. You know, that said, he does have some good stacking partners if we assume Higgins sits, and Jamar Chase. Mike Gesicki ran 75% of routes last week, and he's very cheap. What are you seeing on the Bengals side here, Graham? Because they're a pretty tricky team, I think.
They are. I kind of want to fade it. I feel like, you know, like you said, Burrow's not playing all that well. Miami's defense has also been playing significantly better. You look at the last 8 weeks by EPA per play, they're 10th best. They've been really good. Still struggling a little bit in terms of their pass defense, but their run defense is a lot better. Their pass rush is okay too, and it's like, we haven't really seen the ceiling yet this season from Burrow. It's obvious that he still has one. He had a good game against the Bills in a game where he got pushed, but is this a game where Miami's really going to push all that hard? The total is 47.5. I think Achane's an amazing play. We'll talk him, but I am struggling with this Bengals side. Chase, obviously, you make the upside case for him every week, but it feels like on DraftKings this week, this is one of our best weeks we've had in a long time in like the 6K range. We love Mike Evans, Wan'Dale, Justin Jefferson. Just talk through those guys. They're good plays. It doesn't feel like this is a week where you really have to pay up to get a ceiling at receiver. think there's a lot of good 6K value in that range. So I'm struggling with this Bengals side, man. It feels wrong because, like I said, the game total's good. Like, we've got one of these few games with a really good game total, but I think there's just a few avenues for this game flopping. Both these teams are just like completely dead. Zach Taylor might be completely dead. It feels like this game could underwhelm. Of all the games that have a decent total, I think this is the most like dangerous one.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, it is pretty tough to pay up for wide receiver this week. And I think that's probably the best argument for Bengals stacks is that if you do pay up for a Jamar Chase, you're going to end up on a very different build. We have guys like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs projecting really, really well. They're going to be really, really popular. I'm going to make a similar argument later in the show for Trey McBride where, paying up for the most expensive tight end, paying up for an $8,600 Jamar Chase, it just gets you to a very different build. So that's something that I'd think about in like a single entry or a 3 max. And, totally fine for MME stuff too. But I do think that's the best argument for the Bengals because at least based on like projections and stuff, Chase projects pretty well, but Burrow isn't really popping a ton. Ryan, I'm curious, anything we missed on the Bengals side? And then, of course, we got to talk Dolphins. $4,000 Quinn Ewers starting for a benched Tua Tagovailoa. What do you think about this game and 7th round rookie Quinn Ewers here?
Yeah, largely agree with what you guys said for the Bengals. It's a rough schematic matchup, but yeah, I also just have a lot of reasons to not be that excited. We can move past that. Quinn Ewers at 4K. There's a lot of cheap quarterbacks I like this week. This is like testing my adherence to this take, though. I don't think I'm going to get to that much Quinn Ewers. I think it's viable. The only specifically if you're stacking him with like a Darren Waller plus probably a Devon Achane, use a Bengals bring back. I think that's fine. I'd probably just rather play the Dolphins pieces by themselves, though. I don't think you need to play Ewers with them. Achane is really interesting to me. So I don't see him as that different of a play than a Bijan Robinson, than a Jahmyr Gibbs. He's going to be at about half the ownership just because there was a bit of an effect on the implied total. It came down about 3 points once we learned that Quinn Ewers was the starter. So that affects projections, filters through to ownership across the industry. But Achane definitely still has the same type of ceiling that we've seen from him, especially in this matchup. Single best matchup for opposing running backs, top 3 for opposing running backs through the air over the past 5 weeks. I think that's where Achane can also really make his living here, where the Bengals funnel everything underneath. 5th most receiving yards per game allowed within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Achane averaging 5 targets per game in that area of the field. I can imagine that that's going to be most of the passing offense is very short, quick throws to Devon Achane, potentially to Darren Waller. I think McDaniel has a point to prove right now. I'm not exactly sure what it is, probably something to do with Tua being the problem or something along those lines. But I think the way to do that is, a very controlled game plan with a lot of opportunities to get the ball into Achane's hands. He can certainly deliver. So really like Achane as a way to save on ownership among the top expensive running backs. And then Darren Waller down at just 3,500 is also pretty easy to argue for. By far the best schedule adjusted matchup for opposing tight ends. Bengals allowing the 2nd most yards per target over expectation to slot and inline receivers this year. And Waller just has excellent touchdown equity as well. So I think you worry a little bit about the median with him, but very easily the Dolphins get down into the end zone a few times. It's does little designed targets to him down there. It works perfect. So I think Waller's is a interesting play. I think Achane's a great play.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Really love Achane, especially with so much ownership concentrated on Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, who we will talk about in a little bit. I also think really good note, Ryan, on Quinn Ewers stacks. If you are playing him with Achane, are playing him with Waller, definitely use a Bengals player on the other side. Jamar Chase is the preference. I also think Mike Gesicki is a strong value. He's a top 8 tight end value for us, just because Miami's going to be incredibly run heavy in this game. Graham, this was something you mentioned in our projections meeting this morning. When they've had backup quarterbacks play in the past, they've been ridiculously run heavy, and in the second half of the season this year, they've been ridiculously run heavy. So I think they're going to want to hide Ewers. We're a little bit lower on Ewers than industry, but if you do think he pops this week, I would trot out a Jamar Chase, because it probably means the Bengals got an early lead. Could also use Chase Brown. He's had a really strong target share as of late. I do question the upside a little bit. He's also 6,900, which is tough. Doesn't project too great. But yeah, I think that's a fun way to play this game. Don't think I have anything else on this one. We can keep it moving to the Kansas City Chiefs at the Tennessee Titans. Total here is only 37.5. Chiefs are favored by 3. No Rashee Rice or Tyquan Thornton for Kansas City. Of course, low total. Gardner Minshew will start because Patrick Mahomes is lost for the season due to a torn ACL. Titans side, no Van Jefferson and Gunnar Helm are both questionable. Both players logged full practices on Friday, so keep an eye out there. Might see Chigo Okonkwo pop a little bit in projections if Helm sits. Ryan, Gardner Minshew, 4,500 in an awesome pass funnel matchup. Chiefs, obviously a ridiculously pass-heavy team already. Titans are the league's biggest pass funnel defense. I'm pretty excited about playing Gardner Minshew, and things should be pretty condensed among the wide receivers with no Rashee Rice, no Tyquan Thornton. We're sort of loosely projecting Marquise Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Xavier Worthy, all for about 70-75% route share. So fairly condensed in that regard. We also have a $4,700 Travis Kelce who pops as a really strong value in our projections. Ryan, what are you seeing on the Chiefs side here?
Yeah, I think the Gardner Minshew, Travis Kelce single stack is really fun and really strong, and I'm going to play a lot of it. You can mix in some of these other Chiefs worthy min price Juju Smith-Schuster for doubles, but yeah, specifically Minshew and Kelce, I am pretty high on. Minshew has shown a fantasy ceiling, at least at times. 18 career games with at least 18 fantasy points. That's only 3 fewer than Jordan Love in way fewer starts. So that is at least decent. Kind of any way you slice it in terms of games where he's actually throwing a lot, he is hitting easily 3x, 3.5, 4x value on this salary. So that he's at least a floor play to me, and possibly pretty good for tournaments, especially alongside Travis Kelce. So we're also taking a little bit of a walk down narrative street here, but he is most likely retiring after the season. He's getting married. Like, the Chiefs just got eliminated. I imagine that Travis Kelce as a competitor wants to go out on top. He is chasing some career accolades. He's only 99 yards shy of getting to second place all time for tight end receiving yards in his career. 203 yards shy of his 8,000-yard season. Shout out to Hilo for putting me onto that initially, but yeah, you have the accolades angle. You have the angle of Minshew has always hyper-targeted tight ends. Per our own Jake Tribbey here, he's at a 24% target rate to his tight ends since 2022. That would be 4th highest among current starters. We saw that even when he was playing on those Colts teams that did not have serious tight ends, when it was like Mo Alley Cox, Will Mallory, and that collection of guys they were trotting out before drafting Tyler Warren, and of course targeted Brock Bowers plenty. So I think regardless of personnel, that is a legit tendency for Minshew. So yeah, it makes me feel pretty good about Travis Kelce at 4,700. Believe it or not, like, the best argument against this is it's a horrible total, as you mentioned up top, 37 point over under. But outside of that, this is pretty fun. And just Minshew Kelce can let you pay up to a lot of other stuff on the slate, a lot of the other skill positions, the expensive running backs we want to get up to. You can go Trey McBride and Travis Kelce tight end in the flex. There's lots of ways to play that and get up to some sweet upside elsewhere on the slate.
Yeah, Kelsey is our highest projected tight end value. And, I worry a little bit less about the total just because every piece in this game is so cheap. $4,500 Gardner Minshew. Obviously, Ryan mentioned Kelsey. $4,400 Xavier Worthy is pretty nice as well. $3K Juju Smith-Schuster. Not too bad. We're way ahead of industry on Juju Smith-Schuster. By the way, I think part of that is because there's a lot of touchdown equity that's sort of opened up from Rashee Rice missing this game. He was, just like behind Devontae Adams basically in terms of red zone targets in his healthy games. And with that gone, guys like Juju, guys like Travis Kelce certainly get a bit of a TD equity boost here. Graham, anything to add on the Chiefs? And then I really don't see much with the Titans that's popping. Gunnar Helm looks like he could be an okay value at 2,900. What do you think here?
I think this game has gross shootout potential for sure. You look at the last 4 Titans games have played over the total, and by far they've gone over like 50 points total scored. That doesn't mean I'm interested in Titans, but I do think Tony Pollard is like the only way to kind of bring back this game if you want to. If you're stacking Minshew and Kelsey, I don't think you have to do this, but Pollard would be the only way to do it, I think. He's gone over 100 yards in back-to-back games. Their run game has finally gotten going, and obviously close spread here. This should be a spot where Titans can try to lean on the run. Obviously, Gardner Minshew has some upside, but he's also been known to throw some absolutely horrendous and hilarious picks that could help Cam Ward, and Titans have the ball a little more in this game. I think this game goes over the total. I don't know how by much. I'd have it closer to like maybe 40, just because Titans offense is kind of picked up still. I still have a lot of respect for Andy Reid, and this Kelsey and Worthy are still plenty enough upside for Gardner Minshew in this pass offense.
Yeah. Another nice thing about this game is, at least partially because of the total, not much ownership here. Kelsey's tracking for maybe 8 to 10% ownership. Xavier Worthy sort of in a similar range. No one else really pushing for much ownership. So if you do double stack Minshew, you get a pretty nice ownership discount on this contest. All right, let's keep it moving. New York Jets at the New Orleans Saints. Total here is 40.5. Jets are 6.5 point dogs. No Mason Taylor for the Jets. Brady Cook expected to start here. Devon Vele, Alvin Kamara, Devin Neal all out for the Saints. Ryan, I feel like the Jets side, only guy that I'm really excited about here is A.D. Mitchell, and I got extra excited because you wrote about him in advanced matchups. So what are you seeing with A.D. Mitchell? Really just feels way too cheap for his volume. Also curious if you have schematic angles for him.
Yeah, definitely way too cheap for his volume, as you pointed out in earlier in the week. But yeah, the wide receiver 15 by expected fantasy points per game since he arrived in New York. He is priced way below that. So a good way to save some money, get some value at the receiver position at just 4,500. And there's legit upside here too. The schematic matchup is really nice. Saints primarily playing cover 3 single high. Against single high looks, Mitchell has a 0.31 targets per route run over his career. That ranks 5th best among all wide receivers over that span, behind only Puka, Jamar Chase, Drake London, and A.J. Brown. So yeah, he is insanely good at commanding targets. We saw him do it again even last week, even with Brady Cook. His catchable expected fantasy points were decent even with Cook. It was better than it was in 2 of his 3 games with Tyrod Taylor. So, yeah, I think A.D. Mitchell is a legit good play here on the Jets side. The only other guy like maybe worth mentioning is Breece Hall. I know he was pushing for some ownership like earlier on in the week. I just can't get there. I think he's healthier now, but we just saw the Jets split the backfield a lot more last week as he entered the week banged up. I just do not trust that whatsoever. Saints have played pretty well defensively over the past few games. So, outside of Mitchell, I'm not really into any Jets.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Graham, we've talked a lot about so far on this show, a lot of cheap quarterbacks on this slate. Tyler Shuck, obviously one of them. He's 5,400, projecting pretty well in our stuff. Also projecting to be one of the 4 or 5 highest owned quarterbacks on the slate. But, with no Vele, no Kamara, targets should be pretty condensed between Jawan Johnson, Chris Olave. So it feels like a really clean double stack. What do you think of Shuck and the Saints offense this week? Oh, he's muted. We got him.
Oh, no. You got me. Damn it. I'm good for one per show, I think, at this point. I was just saying, man, I think Tyler Shuck's a really good play on DraftKings. I think Jacoby Brissett's slightly better. We'll talk about that. I think he's like almost the nuts on FanDuel. He's 6,800. I mean, it's like way too cheap for him over there.
Yeah.
QB 14 by fantasy points per game over the last 5 weeks. Obviously, the Jets just got destroyed by Trevor Lawrence. Their pass rush is non-existent. They're second fewest in terms of sacks since they traded Quinnen Williams. And yeah, I think there's some legit rushing upside here as well. He's 6 or more carries in 4 straight games. And like you mentioned, I mean, the stack is super, super simple. I think it's just Chris Olave for me on DraftKings. He's an amazing price. I was mentioning Shuck on FanDuel. Awesome price there. Olave a little bit less of a strong play at 7,700 over there, but he's not going to have much ownership. There's going to be way more ownership on some of these value guys in the 6K range. So yeah, I love the stack. I loved Ryan's AD Mitchell analysis. I think that's a really fun game stack, playing Shuck with Olave and then bring it back with AD Mitchell. I think that makes a ton of sense in this game.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Shuck's rushing upside. Only Josh Allen has more runs over the last 4 weeks
That's
than
crazy.
Tyler Shuck. Shuck also leads all quarterbacks over that stretch with 4 designed rush attempts inside the 10. So yeah, pretty legit rushing upside for a guy who is not really regarded as a great athlete coming out.
And Jake, I think it could be even better this week. I mean, Audric Estime and Evan Hull are going to be their running backs this week.
Yeah.
They could just like go turbo Shuck, I guess, and just kind of use him in that Josh Allen role in the goal line, which is pretty fun for fantasy. Like even if Olave doesn't have a ton of touchdown upside, I think Shuck, like, he could score 3 times in this game for sure.
Yeah, Graham, I'm sure people are wondering a little bit about Estime. I mean, he's 5K as a play. I feel like this is just the slightly worse version of Devin Neal, where, probably be out there for a good number of snaps, but do we really trust the touchdown upside when Shuck and Taysom Hill are stealing all this inside the 10 work? I really know I don't think I'm going to get to any Estime. Would you have any interest there? He's not projecting for any ownership. That's the only reason I bring him up.
Yeah, I think Ken Gainwell and Aaron Jones are just better plays straight up. Yeah. He's okay on FanDuel, though. 4,900. He's sub 5K on FanDuel, so that's okay over there. Play him with, like, Saints defense and just say, like, the super contrarian play, but playing with Saints defense and just say they destroy the Jets. I saw a tweet from Nick Underhill, Saints' best beat reporter. He basically guessed that it's probably Estime as in terms of like the starting workload. And you look at XFP last week, he nearly tripled up. Hull got a ton of pass down work. So I think he's legitimately in play. Yeah, but like you said, question the upside. And then on DraftKings specifically, I think Aaron Jones projects better in that offense. I think Kenny Gainwell certainly projects better as well. We'll get to the Steelers in a minute, though.
Yeah, I like that. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Denver Broncos. Total here is 47.5. Jags are 3.5-point underdogs. No Baishal Tootin for the Jaguars this week. Ryan, I thought you had a pretty interesting angle that you mentioned in advanced matchups for this game, just regarding, each of these teams rank top 10 in pace. Both of these teams rank in the top 8 most pass heavy by P-Row. Both defenses are pass funnels. That does get me a little bit excited about potentially stacking this game up. I don't know how popular it's going to be. What are you seeing in Jaguars Broncos?
Yeah, I think so. You laid it out well. Like on the surface, I want to be into this game. It's just when you start looking at each of the individual plays and players, I just have kind of a big nitpick at the very least with pretty much all of them. So I think the way to play it is probably just mostly stay away in one-offs, but allocate some part of your portfolio to just like full-on game stacks here is how I would probably want to play it. I think I prefer Trevor Lawrence of the quarterbacks. He's been playing out of his mind over the past few weeks. He makes for pretty easy double stacks with Jacoby Myers, Brian Thomas Jr., Myers should benefit. It should see the least Pat Surtain. I'm not entirely convinced that it's going to be like a full-on shadow on Brian Thomas Jr., but most likely Myers stays away from Surtain the most. It's a decent schematic matchup for him. Leads the team in target share against man coverage since arriving. He's been really solid. It's just always the same thing with Jacoby Myers. He's 5,500. He's a strong value. you question the upside, of course. But yeah, I think within game stacks, it's fine if you just say that there's a ton of pass attempts each way in this game and the volume kind of inflates for everybody. But yeah, you can also argue for Brian Thomas. He's up at 2.5 yards per out run against man coverage, which is a nice boost. Surtain kind of shut down Christian Watson last week, got burned by Terry McLaurin a few weeks before that. Like I think within a game stack, it makes sense to just say maybe this isn't Surtain's like best game. And yeah, Thomas can certainly kind of push the pace of this game, like push it into shootout territory. He's been getting used a lot more downfield over the past few weeks. That seems to be what he's best at as well. It was kind of where he was at his most efficient in his rookie season when he wasn't being asked to run all these intermediate routes over the middle of the field. BTJ does his best thing on the sidelines, going downfield. So I think that's solid enough as a double. Brenton Strange also a little bit interesting in here just because the Broncos have gotten shellacked by tight ends recently. They've allowed the most schedule adjusted points per game over the past 5 weeks to the position. Strange at just 3,900. The usage hasn't really been there the past couple weeks with both Myers and BTJ in the fold, but he is going to get played the least, so that could be a way to kind of get off of all the ownership, just substituting Strange in for probably Myers in those stacks. So yeah, I think all of those guys are legitimately in play. We have a couple options on the Broncos side for potential bringbacks that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, that's basically my spiel. I don't feel great about any of these guys individually, but I do think the game environment could be good.
Yeah, I am. I'm right there with you. I really like those angles. When it comes to guys that you can play on the Broncos side, the guy who stands out the most in our projections right now, R.J. Harvey, had the 6th best workload of any running back over the last 3 weeks, priced as the RB11 on an 11-game slate. Also set season highs in rush attempts, backfield carry share, easily led the backfield in route participation for the 2nd game in a row. So Harvey looks pretty good at 6,200. Graham, I'm curious what else you're seeing on the Denver side. Any other notes to add on this game? I know Cortland Sutton's projecting pretty well, but I'm always a little bit iffy about, say, a 15%, maybe even higher owned Cortland Sutton, because he just seems to always get you between 12 and 20 DK, but really hasn't broken a slate in quite a while. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, Sutton's a part of that group I was talking about. He's a decent value, but I'm with you. Projects well, certainly makes sense in Nick's stacks. He's okay. I think Harvey's a really strong play, though. Like you were kind of lining up, this usage is very, very good. It's like borderline bell cow worthy, and now they're 3-point favorite, 3-point favorites, 3.5-point favorites now actually. Strong team total, great price. I think Harvey has some big play upside. 6,200 is very, very nice for him. Other than that, man, I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Knicks. I think there's just some other quarterbacks I prefer. He projects okay. I'm like deadlocked on Jared Goff. We'll talk Lions here in a second, but I love Goff this week. So maybe that's my bias, like sneaking in there. But really just Harvey, 6,200. I've been playing him basically every single week since he kind of took over the starting job, just because he's been too cheap, and I think you could make a similar argument this week.
Yeah, I think Harvey's my favorite angle on the Broncos. If I am stacking up Knicks, something like Sutton and Pat Bryant is fine. Not super excited about it, but might have a little bit of exposure there. Keep it moving. Atlanta Falcons at the Arizona Cardinals. Total here is 48.5. Atlanta favored by 3 points. Drake London officially listed as questionable for this game. Head coach Raheem Morris said he will play. On the other side, Marvin Harrison Jr. will return from the heel injury that's kept him out of the last few games. Bam Knight for the Cardinals also out. Graham, let's start with Bijan Robinson. I mean, scored at least 30.5 DraftKings points in 3 out of his last 5 games. Draws an Arizona defense that ranks as the single softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing running backs. At least if you're paying up for a running back, I think it's pretty clear that Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs are the best plays in terms of projected value. Obviously, we made, I think, what is a pretty good argument for Devon Achane relative to ownership in tournaments. But Graham, I mean, Bijan Robinson, awesome play. Anybody else stand out to you on the Atlanta side here?
Yeah, I think Bijan's the best play on the slate. And the argument is like kind of a twofold thing. The Falcons have a really good team total. 25.5 points is super strong for a team that's completely dead. It's the fourth best team total on this slate. And then this Cardinals run defense has been terrible, like 90 or more yards in 9 straight games given up on the ground. They've given up 120 or more in 6 of those games. And I just thought it was kind of funny last week that Atlanta's like completely dead to the playoffs, and they're giving Bijan this like massive role. Like for the first time all year, they're not really messing around with Tyler Algier. It's like, great, thanks guys. I want to lean into that. And, this week we've got these top end running backs, obviously at the top between Achane, Gibbs, and Bijan, but I just prefer Bijan straight up. I just think the upside with him is amazing. He's game script insensitive, and if the Cardinals do get a lead, he might be a good thing for Bijan because he'll get a bunch of checkdowns. And then like with Kirk, you look at the targets. Last week he had 11. The week before that was just 2. He had 7. He's got like legitimate double digit 8-9 target potential in this game if the Cardinals do get a lead. So I just think he's super safe, and the ceiling is obvious with Bijan.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we have a massive 26-point DraftKings fantasy point projection.
That might be the best all year Atlanta's had, right? I think so.
I was saying his Bijan's projection, not their implied total. But yeah, I mean, both teams have really strong implied totals. I know Atlanta's up there, right around 25, 26 points this week. So yeah, really, really good offensive environment for both teams. I mean, this Arizona defense just can't stop anybody. Graham, any interest in these pass catchers, though, like guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts obviously just broke best ball in Week 15. I think I do have some. It's both guys project pretty well. What do you think?
London is really interesting in tournaments at 7K, I think. Kirk's playing pretty well. Like you mentioned, the Cardinals defense is dead. They're looking so burnable. Puka killed them. Nico only needed like 3 catches to kill them last week. I think we do have some injury docs on London in terms of like maybe his route share and efficiency, but 7K for a guy who is averaging 25 PPR points per game over his last like 6 healthy games. Like, yeah, we should certainly be interested in that. I think the only obvious thing that you can really paint against him, though, is, what if he's not 100%? I mean, with these PCL injuries we've just seen, like with Puka 2 years ago, with Pearsall this year, it just takes these guys, a while to get back. CMC as well. He had a PCL at the end of last year that ended his season. So they can just be really tricky injuries. It's the only argument against him. I think the price is amazing, though.
Yeah, the price is really good. I mean, Graham noted 25 DraftKings fantasy points per game over his last 5 healthy games. That would rank second behind only Jamar Chase and that would rank first, 13% better than Jackson Smith and Jigba over all wide receivers over the full season. So really, really great.
I was the guy who was saying that London has no ceiling, and he was doing that with Michael Penix, and Penix is like objectively getting outplayed by Cousins. So, I think if London's 100%, man, he could break the slate at 7K. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, best argument for Pitts, it does feel a little point chasey. He's priced up at 5K, but I do think you can make a decent argument here just because it's a top 5 schedule adjusted matchup against the Cardinals, who, again, just really can't stop anybody on defense. Cardinals offense, Jacoby Brissett, somehow 5,300. I mean, this guy just had the best game that any quarterback's had all year against the Houston Texans at 5,700 last week, and they moved him down in price by $400 to 5,300. He's the obvious cash quarterback this week. He projects incredibly well. He's finished as a top 12 fantasy scorer in all 9 of his starts, averages 22 fantasy points per game over that stretch. I mean, just incredible production from Brissett, and he's, among the handful of quarterbacks that DraftKings has just refused to price up this year. Ryan, obviously, Brissett projects incredibly well, really, really strong play. I think it gets a little tricky, though, when it comes to stacking him with Marvin Harrison back. Michael Wilson seems to either be Calvin Johnson or just like a league average wide receiver 2, depending on Marvin Harrison's status. And then, of course, we have a $7,600 Trey McBride. How are you sort of viewing Brissett stacks this week in a good offensive environment?
Yeah, so I think Brissett stacks, period, are amazing this week. He's the best quarterback play on the slate. He will have ownership to show that, but possibly not enough. Like, I really would be comfortable going well above the field on Brissett. It's just so dumb how lowly he is priced. And it's just the perfect game environment. Top 3 over under on the slate. Both these offenses are top 7 fastest by seconds per play. You have the most pass heavy offense in the NFL by pass rate over expectation. Just amazing offensive environment all around. I think you do want to double stack Brissett. Clearly, Trey McBride would be on pretty much all of my Brissett teams. I'm going to put it this way, like aside from it being a pretty solid schematic matchup for him, as I covered in advanced matchups, the usage and the production is just insane. We're at 24.3 DraftKings fantasy points per game for McBride in his games with Brissett. That would rank best among all wide receivers this year. It would be the 4th most productive wide receiver season in the entire history of fantasy points data. He's gone over 29 DK 4 times since week 6. Only JSN and George Pickens have gone over 29 DK 4 times all season, aside from him. And McBride is priced as the wide receiver 4 on this slate. So, yeah, he's an amazing value. The upside is incredible. He's going to be on all my Brissett teams. Really the tricky part is just picking, assuming that Marvin Harrison Jr. does play, is picking between Michael Wilson and Marv. I would just go with Marv personally. So he is cheaper at 5,600. Both of them are in a really solid matchup. Falcons allowing the 4th most schedule adjusted to outside wide receivers. But Marv has been really solid against the blitz. You got a 45% boost to his yards per out run against the blitz this year, which the Falcons do a ton. And we have never seen Michael Wilson go above a 17% target share in any game with Marvin Harrison Jr. active. In the game a few weeks ago, when Marv only played like the first 3 quarters before getting injured, Michael Wilson had just an 11% target share through the first 3 quarters. Like, I think we've seen it enough times where Wilson is not like a playable asset at his price when Marv is in the lineup. That said, I'm not actually as confident in that as I'm laying out. I would probably peg it at like 65-35 of how I would split my Brissett teams between Harrison and Michael Wilson. There's, of course, a chance that Marv just isn't actually that healthy, that Wilson just plays more, is functionally the team's wide receiver 1 for this week. I don't forget about Marv. Like, he's in a really well-priced, really great spot for him.
Yeah, I certainly like that analysis. I'm going to want to kind of like mix and match those guys with Trey McBride. And, again, I think Ryan made a lot of good points on McBride. You're basically getting better than JSN production at just 7,600. Just throw him in your flex, treat him like a tight end. We're not getting much ownership on McBride either this week because we have a lot of cheap tight ends that project pretty well. So like I said with Jamar Chase earlier in the show, if you play McBride, you're going to end up on a pretty different sort of build than a lot of the field will, because I'm only seeing 7, 8, 9% projected ownership for Trey McBride, which just, if we had JSN at this price, everyone would be really excited to play him. He'd probably be 25, 30% owned. Graham, I think final guy that we need to talk about here, Michael Carter, just 5,400. He is among sort of the handful of cheap running backs that we can have some confidence in. What do you think of Carter, who earned a pretty great workload last week after Bam Knight got carted off the field?
Yeah, I think he's really good. So we were talking Estime, we were talking Aaron Jones. I kind of prefer Michael Carter out of all these guys. I prefer him to Tony Pollard as well. I think he projects okay and maybe not, well enough in terms of like what his ceiling outcome could be in this game, because we got a 48.5 team total. We got 2 teams that have been, kind of up in pace. Obviously Cardinals, their volume has just been incredible. I also think he's playable with Jacoby Brissett on DraftKings in terms of the pricing. You look at correlation, Bam Knight and Michael Carter are both positively correlated with Jacoby Brissett this season. And then there's just a chance like he gets all the work. Like, yeah, Amari DiMercato came back last week. It was his first game back from an ankle injury. So he might not have been 100%, but 79% of the snaps to 11% for DiMercato. Got 18 touches, 94 scrimmage yards in a tough matchup. This is a much easier one. So at this price, like, my favorite way to play this game is Brissett stacks with Bijan, but I think with this pricing, I'm typically not wanting to play 2 running backs against each other. But I think it with Carter at 5,400, it makes a lot of sense, especially attached to this Cardinals team, man. I mean, the volume is just it's just like bankable every single week. It's like an ATM at this point, and this price range is just, it's really easy to build around.
Yeah, I really like that take. All right, let's move it on to the highest total game of the slate. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Detroit Lions. Total 52.5. Pittsburgh 7-point underdogs. No TJ Watt for the Steelers. He got Tyrod tailored during, I believe, an acupuncture session. Punctured his lung. Pretty disappointing for Pittsburgh. Graham, I know you mentioned earlier in the show you were really excited about Jared Goff. Obviously, with no Sam Laporta, it is a very clean double or triple stack. I mean, there's really only 3 guys who get the ball for the Lions at this point in the season. So tell me what you're seeing with Goff and the Lions offense here.
Yeah, Goff just has a huge ceiling when he's been favored, and especially when he's at home and favored. And then, yeah, you mentioned they're down their best defensive player in TJ Watt. It's just like a best possible spot. He's QB6 in his 9 games when the Lions are favored this season. You can look through his game logs for the last 3 years. I mean, he's like smashed in some of these game environments. Earlier this season, he put up nearly 40 at 37. I think he had another game over 27 this season. Last year it was same thing. He's popping for a few games over 28. A similar kind of game environment against the Jags, 37.5. He had a game against the Seahawks last year, same game environment, at home favored, scored 27. So like the ceiling is really good, and this is like such an easy stack. I think a part of my love for Goff is I think Amon-Ra should be the highest projected receiver on the slate by like 3 to 4 points. The volume has just been ridiculously good in the games without Sam Laporta, 30, 31, 27, and then last week 44% of the targets. In his last 3 games, he's averaging nearly 29 PPR points per game, and he's cheaper than Chase. Like, it's just like a perfect spot, absolutely perfect spot for Amon-Ra. The only question I have in this game is the Steelers and like their ability to kind of keep this game close. Obviously, their offense has not been functional and competent at times, putting it lightly. But yeah, I mean, just between how I think Amon-Ra should project, Jamison Williams is an incredible value. He's too cheap across the industry again. Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't we be stacking Goff with these guys? It's just like huge ceiling. Yeah, obviously Gibbs though, Jake, like we got to talk Gibbs, and just he's kind of the elephant in the room here. He's cheaper than Bijan, cheaper than Achane, and I think you can make a legitimate argument that he should outproject those guys just based on this game environment. Ryan, like you're one of the dankest stats I've heard all year is your Gibbs stat in these like huge game environments.
Yeah, Ryan, why don't you go on?
Yeah, I'll give it. So the Lions have played 6 other games this year where they have been favored, and the game total has been at least 48 in the over/under. In those 6 games, Jahmyr Gibbs averaging 34.1 DraftKings fantasy points per game, which is just absurd. I prefer him to Bijan slightly. I would agree that Bijan has a higher floor. There are like more versions of this slate where Bijan scores more points. I think there's more versions of this slate where Jahmyr Gibbs goes for 40 than Bijan goes for 40. That's what I'm really after. But yeah, both great plays. Hard to poke holes either way.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned our 26-point projection on Bijan Robinson earlier in the show. We've got a 26.7-point projection on Jahmyr Gibbs, who is a little bit cheaper than Bijan. Obviously, both guys will be very, very popular. Ryan, I think one of the nice things about this game is that if you are stacking up the Lions, the bring back on the other side feels pretty clean between either DK Metcalf or Kenny Gainwell. Gainwell's a guy who's hit 16 DK in 4 of his last 5, averaging 18 DraftKings points, fantasy points per game over that span. Also, and this is a crazy stat to me, he has as many red zone targets over the last 4 weeks as Jackson Smith and Jigbo with 7, hit a 17% target share in 4 of his last 5 games. So Gainwell projects as a really good value in our stuff, as does DK Metcalf. Ryan, anything else you're seeing on the Steelers side that jumps out to you?
No, it really is just that you're picking between those two. I agree. I think Gainwell is clearly my favorite of the two, including, especially when you bring ownership into it. Right now, we are projecting Metcalf for about double the ownership of Gainwell. As you've said, the usage has just been great for Gainwell. You can make some nitpicks in the matchup for him, but yeah, just with that type of target volume, it's hard to argue with. Really cheap running back, you need that for these Lion stacks. So I think Gainwell is the best bring back. Metcalf makes a lot of sense on paper at just 5,400. I mean, you've got the Lions allowing the second most receiving yards per game on the deep ball, third most DraftKings points per game to opposing wide receiver ones. I totally get it with Metcalf, but I feel like there have just been so many DK Metcalf spots this year where we're like, oh yeah, this is it. And it's 6 fantasy points. Like that is so live to happen with DK Metcalf when he's looking at 22% ownership. That's like very hard for me to swallow. Schematically, there's also like some concerns for him too. The Lions play the most man coverage in the NFL. Metcalf historically has been good against man, not at all this year. 40% less efficient by yards per out run versus man coverage. Just 109th out of 133 receivers in average separation score versus man coverage this year. So I think this probably speaks to some of the inconsistencies that he's had throughout the season. And I think this could be a spot where that shows up, unfortunately, despite like how great he is, like how great of a spot it is, at least in theory. So yeah, prefer Gainwell, get it with Metcalf, but yeah, 22%, it's just hard for me to click.
Yeah, that's about where I am too for this one. Don't think I have anything else to add on that game. And we can breeze through this last one. Las Vegas Raiders at the Houston Texans. Total is just 38.5 because the Raiders are 14.5 point underdogs. Injury front, Woody Marks, Christian Kirk, Nick Chubb, all questionable. Marks only managed a limited practice on Friday. Kirk is sick. He missed Friday's practice. And then Nick Chubb logged a full practice on Friday. Graham, I mean, the Texans have the second highest applied team total, just over 26 points on this slate. That does make me somewhat interested in sort of a minimally owned Stroud, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz stack. Can also mix Jaden Higgins in there. What do you think of the Texans in this spot? Oh, he's muted again. Two
Damn
times.
Damn it. Oh, man. Love that, y'all. It feels wrong to say this, and I'm puking. I'm throwing up everywhere because I played Woody Marks on all my lineups last week, and that failed. But why wouldn't we kind of be into it again this week if he's healthy and active? I did get a limited practice on Friday. Obviously, there's the medical risk. He's the new Jalen Waddle. He goes in the medical tent at least once per week. He has just like a routine visit in there. But, yeah, I mean, this team total and this dead Raiders team, like, I could certainly see flop lag for Marks this week, and nobody's on it. I've questioned the upside with Stroud for years at this point. You know, at this price, I just want to play Shuck. I want to play Brissett. Stroud, you look at his last 2 seasons, he's finished among the top 12 scoring quarterbacks on a single week just 6 times in his last 26 games. It's just not good enough, and real pace concerns, obviously, in this game. Raiders could just get completely destroyed. Nico is a fine price. I think I prefer Lamb. Definitely, like I was saying, prefer Amon-Ra. It's a tight pricing slate, but I can try to find 900 to get up to Amon-Ra, who I objectively think just has like a 40-point ceiling in a way that Nico doesn't have in this spot. Yeah, it's tricky, man. Like you said, it's weird. Like, Texans project incredibly well. It's just really hard to play them. I will be playing some Woody Marks and just bashing my head against the wall, 6,600. He's gotten an amazing role in the last 3 games that Nick Chubb has played, and if he's fully healthy, we'll see. Maybe we'll get some kind of news on that this weekend. But if he's fully healthy, nobody's going to play him, and he's still too cheap.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting angle. Ryan, curious if you have anything to add on Texans here.
I guess the only thing I'd say is 6,600 is just a little pricey for me, given all of the really solid, like 5K-ish running backs we have, Michael Carter, Ken Gainwell. If Marks were to get ruled out, I would be kind of interested in Jawar Jordan on like a similar, we'd probably need a little bit of coach speak to feel good about that. But yeah, in a similar kind of vein where he's 5K, he was really efficient last week after Marks went for over 100 rushing yards. It's a huge spread. Like you could make that type of argument to me. If it's 5K, I'm more receptive to it. Probably not Marks for me, but yeah, there's just nothing else in this game I'm that into. Like Stroud, Nico, Higgins are all just kind of a tier below all of these other plays that we've talked about throughout the show for me. So I'm ultimately not going to get to much. I mean, there's Brock Bowers, but like it's hard to play anybody on a team with a 12-point implied total. So yeah, I'm probably not going there either.
Yeah, I believe Raiders total is down to 11.5. If I had to play somebody, I don't mind Bowers. Genty is just totally off the board for me, even at 5,600. Projecting for some ownership, I really don't think many people are going to get there. I mean, he would need, I think, multiple scores. He's still losing some routes to Mostert, and I mean, they just aren't getting in the red zone. So, playing a running back from a team with an 11.5 point team total is not something that really ever works. But I think that does it. Yeah, I don't have anything else unless you guys do. So that'll do it for the Week 16 edition of Cashing Points. For next week, there is a Christmas slate, so there will be I believe, Christmas Eve Cashing Points for that 3-game slate, and then we will have our normal show on Fridays at 7, the day after Christmas. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.